Now, one thing that might not be entirely clear is the relationship between users, tenants, subscriptions, and management groups. And so in this video, I'm going to attempt to explain it. Now, at the lowest level, you have the user. When you create a brand new Azure account, you're creating a user by default as well. But once you create that user, you're part of what's called an Active Directory, which is a tenant. So when you create your free account, you got your user, you're given a default directory. Now that directory, again, it has at least one user, which is you as the administrator. And then you can add either guest users, you can associate it with your corporate users in your on-premises Active Directory. You can manage users directly in here with just without an on-premises Active Directory, etc. So that's all going to be talked about in the Active Directory section. Now, one thing that you need to know, though, of course, is that in order for you to create any kind of resources, you need a subscription. So if we go into the subscriptions service, we can see that, first of all, this subscription is associated with Scott's Course Outlook directory. So my Active Directory determines what subscriptions I see. And so I can see I have one active subscription associated with this tenant. It has a cost. This subscription is where all the costs get accumulated. So when I go to create a resource, let's say I create a web app, one of the first decisions I have to make is what subscription to choose. And you can see here, sometimes you have multiple choices. Now, that's why I put a label on one of them so that I would always be clear in terms of which one to select. Let's go back to subscriptions here. So this is a label that I added that says Azure Courses. Now, you can create more than one subscription. So even on the same tenant, you can say, I want a second or a third or a fourth subscription. The way you do that is this add button, and it'll take you to a new tab. And from there, you're going to choose what are called offers. Now, Microsoft actually has more than a dozen offers for Azure. Now, the free account is one of the offers. You can only ever own one free account, so you'll never get a chance to open a second free account. Pay-as-you-go being the most common upgrade from the free account. And so this means you're going to put your credit card there, and as you use resources at the end of the month, you're going to get charged for it. There are also support upgrades you can get. So if you want to have access to Microsoft's support team through emails or phone calls with various service level agreements, you can sign up for a support level. Microsoft also has enterprise level accounts. The partners, the certified service partner accounts, you can have MSDN accounts if you get credits from that, student accounts, Spark accounts, etc. The offers on screen are not the only ones available. So the most commonly you would want to create a pay-as-you-go account. Now I'm not going to go through the process of creating a second account here. Just this is how you would start the process of doing that. Now why? Why would you want multiple subscriptions? Now most commonly this would be done because you have multiple payers, multiple credit cards. Some resources get charged to so-and-so's Visa. Some resources get charged to this other person's MasterCard. And so you would create multiple subscriptions. And then when you create the resources, you would choose the correct subscription. So I can go into plus sign here and say web app. And if you've got Bob and Alice as being two subscriptions, you could choose Bob or Alice when you're creating the resource. And that's how we would know who get charged. In an enterprise environment, oftentimes we'll see that when you've got multiple customers. And so let's say you're a consulting agency and you've got 5 customers. And so you're going to have customer 1, customer 2, customer 3. And you do not ever want customer 2's resources to accidentally be created in customer 1 account. That gets really messy. Then you have to explain to both of them why this charge is being retroactively applied or why this credit or, so creating separate subscriptions when you've got separate payers is the clearest and most straightforward reason. Sometimes also in organizations, even if there's a single payer, you want the clarity to know which resources, which projects are being billed at what cost. And so you'll see that by department or by business unit. And so you've got your, future sales team having its own budget and its own subscription, the consulting services team having its own budget and subscription, the, corporate team having its own, or the customer service. And so you can end up with 5, 6, 20 subscriptions based on just making sure that everyone in the organization is properly separated. Now, of course, that gets tricky because at the user level, you would need to grant access to, let's say there's an administrator who needs access to all of them. And so then you need to then make sure the get access to the subscriptions that they need. It also gets a bit messy when you're talking about policies, you're talking about predefined roles and assigning permissions and reports and things like that. So one thing that you can do to manage that is called a management group. So if I go up here and I search the word management, I'll see management groups pop up in services. Now, a management group is basically an organizational structure. It's just a folder that can contain other management groups or contain subscriptions. And so I've already created an empty management group. I go in here and it's completely empty. You have the root group. So you're always going to have a root group. And then you're going to have one or more subscriptions, and then you can have management groups. Now I can then move, let's say I want my main subscription to be under this management group. I can then click the three dots, say move, and then I can choose the management group, and it will basically make the hierarchy of management groups and subscriptions. Now, the thing with management groups is you can then have, let's say you have your IT group and you have your business group, and you can have different permissions. You can assign people to the group level and they would have the right accesses to the subscriptions underneath. So this is similar to the resource group concept, where you've got a way of managing permissions at a group level. That way you're not going into each of the individual subscriptions and then having to manage the permissions one by one, making sure everything's there. Now, one thing that's not covered in this course, not covered on the exam, is this concept of blueprints. And so taking that management group concept to a step further is being able to create a subscription, which is your prototype. And then every time you need a new subscription, you create it using a blueprint instead of creating it from scratch. And the blueprint contains all your permissions, your policies, all your custom settings, making sure everyone has access to the right levels that you need. That's your template, and that gets created using blueprints. Now, again, that's not covered, but as you can see, you have users, you have tenants, and tenants have subscriptions, and subscriptions can get organized into management groups, make it easier to control. You can restrict people to a specific management group. They can be nested, stuff like that. Hopefully that makes sense.